of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Good afternoon and welcome to radio show number 592, How Business Transformation Accelerates Organisational Performance. Today we're going to be talking about how intentional and winning business cultures strengthen purpose, amongst other things. Tim and I have already been talking about the fact that we're going to be having a good old chat today, so expect other things in there too.
So true.
So I'm Jo Dodds, your host for today. I'm an engagement consultant working within the Engage for Success core team. The Engage for Success movement is an inclusive movement committed to the idea that there is a better way to work by releasing more of the capability and potential of people at work. We spread the word about employee engagement and shine a light on good practice, inspiring people and workplaces to thrive. And we're widely supported across the UK, involving the public, private and third sectors. If you go to our website, engageforsuccess.org, you can use the link at the bottom of the page to join our newsletter list, and all our social media links are there too. So my guest today is Tim Pointer, who's operating partner at Three Hills. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
And it's not your first time here, I seem to recall. I looked you up. You were on show 100 and something, I've noticed earlier.
Wow, 100 and something to five. What do you say? 592?
592, yeah.
You can't be, no one can say you're lazy, can they?
No, it has gone on for a while. We've done quite a few shows in all that time. So, yeah, so lovely to have you back after all this time. I'll have to not leave such a big gap between now and the next time. Start, Tim, by telling us a bit about who you are and what you do, because you're not just an operating partner at Three Hills, are you?
Well, the great thing is I've been very fortunate because I've been working around, well, when I started, it was the personnel space, then it became the human resources space, and now people and culture, sometimes human capital space. I don't know. I just work with people. And I've been doing that for well over 30 years now. And I've been really fortunate because it's a career that's taken me around the world and back. I've lived and worked in Asia Pacific and North America and worked across Europe. But that fascination with how you set people up for success, understanding the purpose of the organization and how to embrace the energies of people to get stuff done, that doesn't change as the years tick by. And what happened a couple of years ago now is that I was approached about taking a move into private equity and joined Three Hills, and I work as an operating partner. And what that means is that I work as part of a value creation team, and we work across the investment portfolio of the firm, going into each of the businesses which the firm's making an investment in, starting from the due diligence when it's being assessed for potential investment, and then working with the leaders of those businesses all the way through the term of the investment. And what's fascinating for me is I love working with businesses that are going through transformation. I love that sense of having audacious goals and working out how we're going to get stuff done. I love working to deadlines. I love working with complex situations and multiple stakeholders. And the fascinating thing about the Three Hills portfolio is it brings all of that complexity, but also because we invest across sectors, we're agnostic when it comes to the other sectors in which we invest, then you get lots more variety in terms of very different businesses working in different markets. So yeah, it's very good for the grey matter, Joe, let me say that.
And I'm really interested. I was talking to someone the other day about private equity, and I was sort of comparing it a bit to governments. I don't know if anyone else has done the same. That you're quite often investing for a fixed period of time, and does that then impact what you do? And I think in some organisations it probably does not very well, and I'm sure you're going to tell me that it does impact you, but not in a bad way, because you really do focus on the people, and I don't think a lot of private equity necessarily does. So how does it work? So you go into an organisation for a period of time, and the idea is to build value. We as employee engagement people see the people bit as a big part of that, but I don't think all
absolutely
private equity does. But tell me how it works for you.
Well, I don't agree with that assessment, because I think the nature of, if you think about the nature of any investment, so if you think about what's happening in the UK today, we're having conversations about the investments that we're going to make to secure our water supply. for future generations, and that's investing with a particular horizon to the investment. We're talking about how we're going to invest in the defence of our country, and what that investment will require in terms of today's announcement in terms of nuclear submarines, for example. There's lots of investments that have particular horizons to them. And then in the nature of private equity, you're making an investment for a period of years in order to transform a business, to take it on a journey and to realize ambition. And that's often through a mix of organic growth in terms of growing the business, building out more products and services with its existing clients, taking it into adjacent markets, taking it into adjacent products and services, perhaps taking it through a journey of mergers and acquisitions. But fundamentally, you're building a larger business that's going to employ more people, that's going to provide greater security for all of the stakeholders, the investors, the employees, their customers, the partners who they work with in order to realize the ambitions of the business. And that then leads to a more successful business. And the nature of any period of private equity is that when you come to the end of the period of the investment, obviously the strength of the business denotes the value of the business and therefore the return on your investment. And part of the way that you evaluate the value of any organization are, of course, its people. Because when the next wave of investment is going to come in, that could be a trade sale, that could be going to a different perhaps size of private equity investment. One of the first parts of that due diligence, and remember, I do this piece of work in terms of going in and conducting this assessment, is you look at the people, you look at the capability of the people, their experience, the nature of their understanding in terms of the operations of the products and services, how deep they have the commercial performance of the business, and you look for the evolution of that. If you hadn't built up the capability of the people, the governance under which the organization is run, and the future potential of that business, then you're not going to realize the next wave of investment. And PE firms are not then doing their job. They're not representing their investors in the right way. And that's why I feel very passionately that the people strategy within any of these investments is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. So this is quite different but similar in terms of what you've done in the past, as in you are looking at people within an organisation and how to sort of get the most from those people. But you've worked for a number of different organisations. We were laughing, saying earlier, as we get older, we've got more history. But some of the companies you've worked for, Curry's Creative Artist Agency, Diesel, Beam, Suntory. Were they different? Were they very different? Were they very similar? Obviously, you've got the retail thing in there. Sort of differences and similarities. Compare and contrast. This is like an exam question.
It does. It sounds like my children preparing for their A-levels. I think that there's so much context, isn't there? And context is queen when you're working through any business conundrum. You're constantly thinking about that evaluation of where is the business today. And sometimes leadership teams really need some help with that very honest analysis, because that understanding of why we are successful today, how we are successful today, how we measure success, and how it can be evolved, that's really critical. Because so often we focus on the next part of the exam question, which is how will we achieve future and increase success? But we have to be super clear as to what success today looks like and why, and then how are we detailing our ambition for the future, and then what's the delta between the two, and what it will require, what's required to then bridge that delta to get us to the new position of success, and what that means in terms of our products, our services, our experiences, what it's going to mean for our people in terms of their capability, their skill set, how we're going to make sure that we've got that talent coming through an organization, which is a value in itself, how we're clear as to how we are working to understand the different challenges and opportunities that the business is going to face, how we're understanding the governance requirements. Obviously, all of us are working within constantly changing legislative frameworks or governance frameworks, and how we're understanding fundamentally the needs of our customers, our clients, and how they are going to be conducting their lives and their businesses in the future. We all know, we only have to walk down the high street to see this, of products and retail offerings, because you mentioned I worked in stores back at the start of my career, and I absolutely did. Those. So we see every day how businesses refresh and change and adapt, and we also see those that do not. And that is fascinating, at the heart of transformation. So I look back across that experience of working in FMCG and technology, of working in Asia Pacific or North America or the UK or across Western Europe. It's always that evaluation of, what's the nature of success going to be in tomorrow's world, and how are we going to be assured that we're in the right spot to succeed within that environment.
I was reading an article the other day about how all the VUCA discussions has changed to what's the new I can never get the word right acronym now. It's something like Binker or something like that. I can't think what it was now.
Well, the fact is, we've been using, is it VUCA or VUCA? I never know, but it always sounds like something you have on your foot. That was created in the 1980s. Yes. In the same way that we were talking about, the war for talent. That's a McKinsey phrase from the late 80s, early 90s, and we keep coming back to these phrases.
Yes.
But fundamentally, it is that understanding of, the volatile, the uncertain, etc.
Yes.
But it means, what does it mean? It means that we lean into the questions that are in front of us, so that if we have concerns about the evolution of technology, and let's start with artificial intelligence, for example, then how are we creating a high performance culture in which we are seeking to understand what that evolution means for us, in which we are demonstrating as a leadership team that we're leaning into those conversations every day, and that we're curious, that we're engaging with it, that we're understanding what it means for our clients and customers, and we're setting up little experiments within the organization and getting conversations going about, how have you used that AI tool? Have we thought about what that can mean for our technology? Are we understanding how our clients are engaging with this? Oh, some are, some aren't. Interesting. What does it mean for our governance? How are we making sure that our data is being protected in exactly the right way, but also that we're not saying, well, we can't even get engaged with this at all, and therefore being outflanked by competitors. And I think with all shifts, you're constantly demonstrating that, yes, we have the curiosity to engage with it, and we're working out what it means for us. And the more that we engage in that conversation, not with any arrogance in terms of we understand what it means, but with that ongoing conversation about, I found this out, or I read this, or I've noticed that so-and-so is doing that, then it just demonstrates we're a business alive to opportunity. And we have that desire to be always learning across a business. I think, that is so fantastic, because it also demonstrates that any one of us can have the answer to these questions. It's not tied up in the boardroom.
No, absolutely. Well, I don't even know about answers. I've just found it now. So the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, has been replaced by BANI, brittle, anxious, non-linear, incomprehensible. It doesn't sound very positive to me.
It doesn't, does it? And that's why it hasn't popped into my head yet. It just sounds as though it's fearful. And I'm an eternal optimist. I don't work with that sense of fear. I work with this deep sense of curiosity and purpose.
Yes.
And therefore, I think with all of these pieces, and it might be, yes, okay, we see changes all the time in terms of global trade changes. What does the changes in climate or our environment mean for us? Political shifts, the challenge of cost of living. We see all of these pieces, but every time there's an opportunity to step into that conversation, understand where our employees, our partners, our clients, our investors are, and have those conversations, And
Mhm.
I'm one of those people that firmly believes that every conversation is a step towards progression. And it's by constantly engaging with those conversations that you can seek to progress the business. And any strategic ambition, any, for example, period on investment, it's never a straight line from point A to point B. There's lots of twists and turns and pitfalls along the way. But every conversation that we have that identifies a challenge and gets the right people together to have that conversation and to work out what their next actions are going to be, and to have that agility in response, I think is just a contemporary way to explore issues and find out how we're going to move towards greater success.
Yes, yeah. So you've worked internationally for a long time, over 25 years, and we're talking about how sort of volatile and changeable everything is, all around the world. What do you see with organisations that have people working across all those different markets? Because some are more stable than others, some are more volatile than others, and so on. And some are, many organisations are working across all of that with different people in different situations. What do you see in terms of engaging employees in those sorts of organisations that are operating in very different markets all at the same time?
I think possibly the first thing is to go in with questions, because any time that you're in a role that suggests that you have expertise, then
Always a bloody thing to do.
exactly. Then be careful. Then people can sort of look to you as though you will have the answers. Now, all I know from someone who's been very fortunate to work across different regions of the world is that no one is going to have more understanding of local culture, norms, legislation than the local person. And therefore, me going into to work with her and to support her and as to how she's working through those pieces, to bring context from the global strategy, to bring support, to understand the resources that are being needed, and to continue with those questions, and to show up every time with purpose, with energy, and with support, then that's a really interesting way of working together. And over time, it builds trust if you're accountable for your actions every time that you say that you'll do X and Y to support. And that might be if you're working on a global diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiative. It might be if you're working on mergers and acquisitions. It might be if you're working on building up the capability across your commercial team and looking at their requirements in terms of pricing, commercial acumen, negotiation skills, steps of a sales call, whatever those components of the conversation are. So I think it's always about having that, not turning up with answers, and seeking to understand what's going on there and seeing if you can be of use. And I have a great need, I think, to be of use in different businesses. And I have this saying that I always like to turn up with a gift, and I don't mean a box of chocolates. I mean turn up with something that is going to be useful to that person. And it might be an article, it might be a podcast, it might be a deck of something that's been delivered previously. It might be with a contact. It might be with a introduction to someone. Just something that's going to help them with the conundrum that they're working away on, and just demonstrate that you are there to work shoulder to shoulder with them through the project.
So I'm going to completely change the subject now. You haven't just done everything you've talked about. You also founded the Business Culture Awards, and that was 10 years ago now.
Yes. If that doesn't, it's like all these things, Joe, isn't it? I cannot believe that was 10 years ago.
No.
It absolutely came from, I mean, as you know, I was at the launch in the Houses of Parliament of Engage for Success all those years ago.
Yeah.
And the absolute focus on understanding what high performing cultures are all about, and for me what engagement means when you work across all of the stakeholders of an organization, across our employees, across our investors, across our partners, understanding what it means for our society, and what it drives for our customers and our audience. That has always fascinated me. And what's happened over the subsequent 10 years is Business Culture Awards has grown enormously. And what's fantastic today after 10 years of work is that there is a deep well of different case studies of lots of different organizations across public, private and third sector, in terms of looking at how people have identified challenges across mergers and acquisitions, across talent, across DEIB, across bringing young workers into the business, etc., etc., and then building all of those case studies together so that you can then dive in and see how other people have identified. Because it was never just about the awards. Identifying good practice is very important, but it was equally about how do you then connect within a community those examples of good practice so that people can learn from each other, and then really get those high energy conversations happening across the network. I co-founded the awards all those years ago. Catherine Longfield now runs that business and is wholly responsible for its success and its continued evolution. And it's really exciting to have contributed some in the early stages of the business, that intent, and to see how it's evolved today. And it's been a wonderful business, a wonderful project to be part of, because it's all about learning. And the more complex that our challenges become, the more important that we can reach out to other people who are seeing similar challenges, never to copy and paste, which is why I always talk about good practice, not best practice. Never to copy and paste, but to learn from one another, and then see what's applicable to our set of circumstances and our context.
Yes. So tell me a bit more about when it first started, and the sort of perspective, because culture 10 years ago wasn't something that was talked about in the same way that it is now, as in it was a bit more niche. I think a lot of people talk about culture now, and even many employees would talk about culture, but 10 years ago I don't think that was the case. Where did it come from?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's a phrase that's been around for a very long time. I mean, loads of people will know that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
And it's a truism. It really resonates with us, that phrase, because we know that we can set off with the best possible intent. But if we don't get everybody aligned to that strategic intent, understanding what it requires of them, because change is required. We cannot progress in our contemporary society without that commitment to evolving an organization. Otherwise, as I say, we end up, as we sort of see on the high street sometimes, walking past a closed up shop front. I mean, that's the reality when we don't respond to the forces around us. But when you have that culture that aligns to strategic purpose and intent, is really clear as to what that intent requires from every person within the organization, and how that's going to be measured, how they're going to be supported in terms of their personal development, what the networks are going to be, because sometimes you have to unlock the current ways of working, work out what the new ways of working are going to be, and then make those reconnections across the business. Because it's a different relationship between the tech team, the product team, and the commercial team, for example, and then build whatever those new relationships need to be, because you're going to a new market, you're developing new products and services, you're working out what your customer is going to need to succeed in tomorrow's world, and the culture has to then evolve and be incredibly responsive to that. And I think we can sometimes get really excited about the way new organizations come in and disrupt, that wonderful word, disruption. They disrupt a sector, often because they're new, and they don't have the very established ways of working that the pre-existing players in that space have, and therefore they can really just attach to what tomorrow's world is going to need and just build for that. And so it's sometimes can be more difficult to take an established organization and to get it to pivot, that cliche about turning the oil tanker and all of that. It's like, so how do you actually get all those conversations happening? When you see an opportunity and you're in the boardroom, that's all well and good, but how are you actually going to get that communication across your middle management team to those who are at the front line and help everyone to understand what that new opportunity is going to mean for them, and also what that success will bring to them in terms of development, in terms of having skills which are going to be relevant in the years to come, in terms of their personal remuneration, in terms of the people that they'll be working with, the network that will give them energy every day. That's what culture means to me, and I have always found that super exciting.
Yes, yeah. We've just got a few minutes left. I've just got one more question about that before we finish on another topic. Yes, another topic. But what's the biggest difference you think between entries 10 years ago to entries now, in terms of, as we said, things have developed on so much and people's views of the culture of an organisation is different now? How do you think that's impacted what people tell you when they send it in there?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, to your point, the language around evolving organizational culture, the way they've thought about business culture is much more developed than it was 10 years ago. I think it was previously thought about in quite a siloed way. And now we see much more cohesive case studies being submitted. The metrics, Joe, have completely changed. That whole awareness of what gets measured gets done has really shifted. And we just don't see, I think 10 years ago we saw more narratives being submitted, and we would look at it and say, okay, it's low on measurement. Now we see an enormous amount of measurement going on. We also see the global reach of the Business Culture Awards is absolutely incredible. So we had at last year's award ceremonies, we had shortlisted organizations who had flown in from North America, from Taiwan, from the Middle East. We have entries from Australia. Just that sense of absolutely international organizations really focusing on what their global culture needs to be in order to succeed. And I think I'd go back to my answer to the previous question. The big shift is that absolute commitment to learning from one another. Whereas at the very start, it was about seeking to have some feedback and some external feedback and affirmation, perhaps, of the work that had been conducted. Today, it's much more about wanting to lock into the community, the case studies, the ongoing work that's happening across the business culture community, and seeking to evolve ideas with others. When I'm looking at bringing talent in across Three Hills, one of the things I'm constantly looking at, if I'm looking for a chair or a CFO, CEO, whatever it is in one of the portfolio businesses, I'm always looking at that individual's network, because her network, what that executive brings into the organization, is so critical, because we do not expect anyone to have the answers to all the questions. So the importance of having people that you can rely upon to bring them into the puzzle with you and to ask questions of, I just think is so imperative.
Yes. Yeah. Lovely, thank you. Well, we're just about to close, but I also have heard on the grapevine that you are becoming a podcast host. Tell us about your podcast.
Okay, if we ever get to 592, I'll let you know. Yes, we are. Yes. So possibly not the biggest surprise. It's as we found out in the last 25 minutes, I'm very passionate about this subject. And yes, so we're launching a Three Hills business podcast, all about transforming organizations, called Powered by People. And I will be interviewing different organizational leaders, and it's solely focused on how organizations transform through successful people initiatives. So we will be talking to people like Eugenio Piri, who was the Chief People Officer and then the CEO of the Dorchester Collection, Tiger D'Souza, the current Chief People Officer at Samaritans, Nadine Bainbridge, HR Director at PlayStation, Kerry Gott, Chief People Officer at Hawksmoor. And we really want to get into those conversations about how they have shifted their organizations, whether it be opening a 5-star hotel, 6-star hotel in entirely new markets, to evolving new consumer products, from using virtual reality within recruitment and induction, or to putting well-being and mental health at the heart of their organization, or leading with kindness, intent, and measurement. These are the stories that I'll be bringing together on that new podcast, and it'll be launching in the autumn. So it's Powered by People, a Three Hills business podcast.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for joining us again on our podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And just to let you know, next week we've got Sarah Pass and James Court-Smith back with us again, and they're talking with Joe Moffat about the 2025 UK Employee Engagement Survey results. So we'll see you next time.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.